Hello and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from Liverpool Echo. I'm Joe Rimmer, and today I'm joined by Theo Squires and Matt Addison to talk the top four emotional exits and Liverpool versus Aston Villa. Theo, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Yeah, down at Klopp's press conference.
Yeah.
Enjoyable? Seemed to be a good one.
It was all right. He was in good spirits. Plenty for him to talk about.
Yeah.
Barbara's section was interesting as well, which I'm sure we'll find out later at half 10.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's certainly a lot for us to get into now.
Good stuff. And Matt, how are you going?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah,
all good. Would have been even better had Newcastle not won against Brighton, as we'll come to, I'm sure. But not too bad.
Well, we'll get into that shortly, but if you'll just allow me, I want to say a couple of things before we start. Theo, I listened the other day to the podcast. See, I haven't been on a podcast now for a couple of weeks since we found out the very sad news about Dan K, who, if you've not heard, passed away recently. Dan was a regular contributor to the podcast. He was a journalist at the Echo. And Theo, I thought you and Gorsty Doyley spoke really, really nicely about him. It was a lovely tribute. I just want to say that Dan was a friend, a colleague, great journalist, a campaigner for justice for Hillsborough. He was an incredible person. He'll be very missed. Anfield will be applauding for him in the 7th minute tomorrow. It'll certainly be emotional for a lot of people, but it'll be a fitting tribute to a great man. And we miss you, Dan. It'll be nice tomorrow for him. Moving on from that, Theo, top four for Liverpool yesterday. Did the dream die last night?
I think every time one of the teams they're up against wins, it does feel like it dies. But then every time Liverpool then follow it up with a win, you get that little bit of hope back. And you look at the fixtures and you go, maybe Leicester, they're desperate for the points. Maybe a great escape for them. They can win at St James's Park. Maybe Chelsea will turn up and get a couple of wins, put in some good performances for Pochettino. It's like Klopp keeps saying in these press conferences, he's got no hope for it at all. He just wants his side to keep winning. And if it's enough at the end of the season, great. If it's not, it's what they've expected. Europa League is clinched at this point. You can almost say the pressure's even more off for Liverpool. Newcastle will be playing Monday, so Liverpool 2 games before that against Aston Villa. That's a chance to keep the pressure on them. United have been dealt a blow with Rashford. He's been potentially ruled out with illness today, so maybe their away blues will continue against Bournemouth. If it goes to the last 8, anything's possible. But as me, Gorsty, Doyley have said all along, since pretty much the Bournemouth defeat for Liverpool, it feels like they've left themselves too much to do.
It's a funny one, isn't it, Matt? Because I look back at this season, and if you'd said to me in March, after that Bournemouth game, for example, do you think Liverpool will have a chance at the Champions League? I've said no, certainly not. And I wouldn't even be thinking about it. But now, if they don't make it, it's almost a disappointing end of the season because of the run that they've been on.
Yeah, and I think that's the frustration for me, really, is it's only one game, isn't it? If they'd have just done better in one game, that could have been enough, and we could have been in a completely different situation.
Salah scored 2 penalties.
The Salah penalties, the 1-0 defeat at Bournemouth, which I hope that Manchester United might be able to repeat this weekend, but none of us really believe. I don't think that's going to happen. So I think that's the really annoying thing for me, is they wouldn't have took that much if they'd have just started this run one game earlier, if they'd have just done it once at some point earlier in the season. If they'd have just not been quite so bad, they would have still been all right. But yeah, it doesn't quite feel like it's going to happen. But I still do think there's a lot to take from this run.
Course,
If they could continue this run, they win the last couple of games, you then set yourself up for the summer next season, and you've got that momentum. But yeah, it is frustrating, and it's a weird one to assess because the season has been completely different. They were so poor for that period. They've been so good now.
Yeah.
It's just not quite going to be enough, I don't think.
And momentum's a big thing, isn't it, Theo? I think about, all the good seasons Klopp's had. They seem to have carried momentum into those seasons. And last year, it felt the reverse, even though it was a great season and they came so close to a glorious finish. Ultimately, the finish was pretty disappointing. The manner in which they missed out on the Premier League and the Champions League sort of felt like a hangover that extended into the season. If they can win 9 games on the bounce going into next season, it feels weirdly, even though you've got Newcastle, you've got Arsenal, you've got United, all of them have at times this year been like the comeback story, if you like. Liverpool could quietly reassert themselves as Man City's biggest challengers. Am I getting carried away, or do you see where I'm going with that?
I see where go. I think it depends who they bring in terms of transfers and the summer and the midfielders they get. Like, we already know they've ruled themselves out with Jude Bellingham. If you're then looking at, they miss out on McAllister to Manchester United, Mason Mount stays at Chelsea, I think that would kill the momentum a little bit. But if they get the targets they want, there's no reason why they can't be positive going forward. Like, they have revamped the attack over the last 18 months. And we're seeing positive signs from Cody Gakpo, Darwin Núñez. I know he's been up and down recently. He's got the injury at the moment, but he's been some good moments. Jota's done well since he's back from injury. Diaz has done well since he's back from injury. Salah's got another 30-goal season. So that front three, whatever it lines up, you can be confident of that. Midfield suddenly doesn't look like a crisis anymore. Like, even though you know they're going to bring in 2 or 3 new players, Fabinho's not been as bad. Henderson's not been as bad. Elliott's taken that next step. Curtis Jones is in the form of his life. Besetic is going to be back from injury. And then they finally got a run where the back four has been consistent. It's been what you want it to be, your first choice back four. Trent Alexander-Arnold's found form again. That's a very good 11. You know, bring in 3, 4, 5 new signings to that, and it is a match for anyone. Like, and they just needed to get over this hump. They're in a better place now than they have been before. Like, recent years, they've been derailed a little bit by, it's the pandemic season, or they've played all the way up until June and there's a mid-season World Cup, so they've not had a full pre-season there. They've got to rush through. This time already, it feels like they've done proper preparation. They're going to have a full summer. They're going to be able to get the players they want in for the start of July, for the start of pre-season. They're going to be doing friendlies in Europe, then going to Asia, and then a couple of weeks later, it's the start of the Premier League. They've given themselves the best platform to push on, to go into the next season. But they do need to respond. Like, they can't just have this as 9 games where they put it all together because the pressure is off, because they've already messed everything up. They need to show that, like 2020-21, it was a blip and the real Liverpool is still underneath the surface, and this is the sign of what we can expect in the future.
I still think, Matt, I look at Liverpool's rivals around the table, and obviously Man City sort of sit apart now, and I think most people accept that. But I look at the likes of Arsenal. They had a fantastic season. Newcastle, obviously, fantastic season. Manchester United mounted something of a little bit of a mini revival this year. But I don't look at them and think that they have more class than Liverpool, or even more potential than Liverpool. I still feel as though if I was to take any squad of those 4 teams, I would take Liverpool's. Do you agree, or do you still think Liverpool have got ground to make up on those sides?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think Arsenal is an interesting one, because we don't quite know how sustainable is this. Is this a kind of 13-14 for them, or is it?
Or is it the real deal? 18-19?
Yeah, is it the start? Are they going to spend 100 million on Declan Rice and go from there? But I think you go through the Liverpool starting 11, and let's say they keep the goalkeeper fit. Still the best goalkeeper in the league for me. Even this season, Liverpool's player of the season, Trent Alexander-Arnold, the best right back still. Whether you want to call him a right back or not, he's still the best. I think the 2 centre halves are right up there. I don't think there's anybody who's at that level in terms of the other clubs. You don't need me to go through all of the team, but the point is, Liverpool at their best, if you keep these players fit, you add a couple to the squad and be able to rotate these players. Even someone like a Jordan Henderson, not necessarily the best midfielder in the league, but if Liverpool have got 2 or 3 extra quality midfield options when Jordan Henderson does play, it's not like he's exhausted, on the verge of injury. He can be fresh, he can be an option.
Same for Thiago.
Thiago is the same. Curtis Jones, I think, is the same as well, as much as he needs the momentum. You don't want to overplay these players. Harvey Elliott, suddenly you're starting to look and think that Liverpool have got lots of different midfield options. And I think, to be fair, that's what Jurgen Klopp was trying to say last summer was, what more do you want in terms of the variety of midfielder that Liverpool have got? They've got the right balance. It's just a case of the availability hasn't been there. And obviously the players that will move on this summer, the ones that will come in, you'd hope will readdress that balance and sort of sort that out. But I just think in every area Liverpool have got that potential. It's just about the consistency, and can they do it for, I suppose they've done it for a third of the season. Can they do that for 3 times as much?
Well, you look at last year, it's basically what you just said there, isn't it? When they went on that run at the second half of the season, it's because everyone was fit. So they could just go, these 3 players, and rotate it, keep everyone fresh. Whereas this year, they've been playing catch-up. Klopp said that from the very start. They had, 10, 11 midfielders available to them in pre-season. By the time we got to the end of August and Artemelo comes in, they've lost, I think, 5 of them to injury. And they were playing catch up from there. You see the forward that was riddled down to 3 options there, and then Firmino picks up an injury when at the World Cup break, and they just didn't have the bodies. Matip, Konate, they're picking up injuries as well. These are our 11 available players. We've got a few youngsters, and it just all fell apart from there. You'd like to think that it's going to be a clean slate for them. They're getting rid of some of these players that have had a lot of injury problems. You wish them well, but it has been a frustration for everyone involved. You want to bring players who don't have that cloud over them, where you can just be a bit more positive about it. You know they're going to be available. You can rely on them. You can rotate that little bit, and you can just go into the new season strong, confident.
But that's it, and I think that people have short memories in football, and obviously, the teams deserve praise. Arsenal have been brilliant, but Liverpool have several bad months or a bad season. Let's be honest, a bad season, and I accept that. But I think I look at Liverpool and think, you talk about players like Saliba, who's obviously a really good player, but would I take him over a fully fit Konate? I'm not sure I would, and I think people forget the class of some of these Liverpool players, and yeah, they do need freshening up, certainly in midfield. They probably need a couple more options at the back. But, I think players like Salah, overlooked again in the Premier League Player of the Season, and perhaps at times he hasn't sparkled, but he's been consistent again. He's got lots of assists. He's scored, again, 30 goals. He's a player who never, ever stops performing. And then Trent, I find it, if you look at the last sort of 7-8 games, and obviously the tactical switch has helped him, and he has struggled this season. But, again, I just find it bizarre almost how quickly people write these players off. He's obviously got great class, and we're seeing that again now. So I just think, I look at Newcastle and think, whatever they do, they've got a great opportunity. They've performed really well. Really impressed with the way Newcastle seem to find goals at the right times in games. They're very good at scoring, even when they're under pressure or when they break away. But I think that the next step for them is very difficult. Ditto for Arsenal. And Man United, Ten Hag obviously picked them up a little bit, but I still think there are a lot of problems bubbling under the surface there. And some of their better players are a little bit older as well. So I just think it's interesting. But one more thing before we move on and talk about 4 exits. I'm just going to quickly make a case, and again, this might be me spinning a very negative thing into a positive, but I've just planted the seed in my mind. Someone did this week, and I can't let go of the Europa League final being in Dublin next summer. It could be. That's better. Give me a Europa League final now over a Champions League. No, I'm not saying. But give me the Europa League final next year.
In Champions League final in Wembley.
But Wembley's rubbish.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, Wembley's a rubbish stadium. But in Dublin, I've said it a couple of times. I'll say it in the podcast. They'd have to build a bridge from Holyhead to Dublin, because the amount of Scouts and Liverpool fans going over there would be unreal.
We need to go and rent an office for a couple of weeks. All of us just go and do our content there. It's so much better.
Well, that's it. And it would be such an occasion. They've never really played. They played a friendly, didn't they? I think under Rod.
They played a couple. They had one to Celtic, and they had an end of season, I think, against Shamrock or something like that.
Yeah. And I think they've never really played a competitive game. That it would just be such an amazing occasion. So that is my silver lining. If Liverpool miss out on the Champions League, is let's see them get to that final in Dublin and just play what would be an incredible occasion there. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done before that. There's a lot of things to happen, but yeah, that's my big dream.
They'd have to be among the favourites.
Well, that's it. They would go
in that competition. Liverpool is going to be the team to beat.
I think they would be the favourites, wouldn't they? Whatever.
You look at the final 4 this year. It's teams that are always in the mix to go the distance, like Seville in the final yet again.
The ridiculous Seville.
Roma, a Mourinho side in a European final yet again. They're up against Juventus. Bayer Leverkusen, granted they've come from absolutely nowhere to get to that semi-final, but an Alonso, the serial winner with Liverpool, Real Madrid, it's always these big sides of the pedigree go far in that tournament.
But saying that, Liverpool are a step above any of them, and I think we would see that again next season, or I'd like to think so. And I just think, I've always liked the Europa League. I've spoken on this podcast before. That
it's a nicer trophy.
It's a nicer trophy, definitely. It's a gorgeous trophy, and I just think it is a better competition than it gets credit for, because people always concentrate on those early stages when the back end of the competition is very good, and that final being in Dublin is just, I can't get it out of my mind. So yeah, anyway, we'll move on from that. 4 emotional exits tomorrow at Anfield. We'll sort of run through them and talk a little bit about each of them. We'll start with the most high profile, which is Bobby Firmino. Call him
You're trying to avoid that for 5 years, haven't you?
Yeah. But I finally give in. But yeah, Theo, I mean, where do you even start? Incredible player for Liverpool, a real trailblazer in the sense that, you know, the position he played in, his style, just with the grace he played. I mean, where do you start on his Liverpool career?
Well, Klopp said he wouldn't have enough time to give him justice on his impact. I think it's the same for us, isn't it? Like, he is this Liverpool legend who was there at the very beginning under Klopp, and he set the tone for it all, along with James Milner, Jordan Henderson. But Firmino's that one. I think there's a bit more in him because he doesn't speak very often.
No.
Like, it's only the Brazil translations he does ESPN. So there's that mystery, but there's always that smile and watching him play, whether it's like the small things where he's on the floor, back heeling it through the legs of, what was it, Cardiff City defender, a little turn he did against Villarreal in the Europa League semi-finals, to the big moments where he gets that winner against Stoke or in the run-in to get into the top four. Oh, so many other big goals where it's Club World Cup, he scored the goal that made them world champions, all the away goals on the way to winning the Premier League, the best year of his career when Liverpool got to the final for the first time in the Champions League. It's a 20-goal season there, sensational in the Champions League. All these big moments. It's almost a shame that he couldn't keep it going as long as Mane and Salah in terms of, I'm the start, I play every single week, I'm getting 20 goals a season every single season. But he's still got his big moments this year, whether it's a last-minute equaliser against Arsenal, getting that nice little goal against Manchester United. He never complained. He always just did it, head down, got it done. He's got one of the best chances in modern Liverpool history, hasn't he? He's someone who will be very much missed. It's probably the right time for him to go and be a starter elsewhere. Like, you look at who Liverpool got, attacking options. Realistically, he's fourth, fifth choice. You're already putting him in that starting 11 now out of sentimentality. But what a servant he's been. It's been a wonderful journey for him. And it's something that Liverpool fans will sing about for years to come. Like, we're almost in this era now where, because they've won so many things and Liverpool work on 20, 30 years without that you take for granted the legends they have, like the true legends they had in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And now they've suddenly got a whole hatful, but Firmino is right at the top with your Salahs and your Van Dijks.
Yeah, and he's someone, isn't he, that just seemed to love playing for Liverpool. And he loved playing football, but loved playing for Liverpool. Mark, I'm going to put you on the spot, and I will do for you as well, Theo, so get thinking. Favourite Firmino moments?
Oh, well, I mentioned the Club World Cup. I think it's hard to look beyond that in terms of just the uniqueness. It's the only time that Liverpool have won that competition, and I think that's the one. The kind of, I suppose that's not really a moment, is it? The actual moment would be that turn against Villarreal. I think that kind of that flair, that just the audacity to do that. I think it's kind of summing up Firmino. But there's too many elements of him to just say he's this or he's that. He's everything. That's why he was so good.
It's a shame that the Club World Cup's not appreciated as much over here, because if you take a step back and look at it from the South American point of view, he is a Brazilian player who scored it against a Brazilian club to be champions of the world, and we know how much his home nation values that tournament. So for him, that moment was absolutely huge, and that's by far the biggest moment of his Liverpool career. But it's those little moments like the Villarreal turn, like the Stoke goal.
Stoke goal.
Personally, I think I love the Arsenal hat-trick because I was there, and it's like, was it the third one where he jinks one way, the other, puts defenders on the backside? But he's had so many big moments like that. Even going down to, I've not scored at Anfield all season, and then popping up against Chelsea the night they win the trophy or lift the trophy. He won't be forgotten, really.
Yeah, but that I would agree. That would be my favourite moment. That little jinking one, leaving every Arsenal defender on their backside. And just that was like, to me, Liverpool playing just the peak of their powers, him at the peak of his powers, and just scoring goals with, grace, poise, everything. Great player. So moving on from him, Milner, a very different type of player, Matt. But I mean, arguably Liverpool's best ever free signing. Just a pro of all pros, isn't he, James Milner? Where'd you start with him? And again, get thinking, Theo, because I'm going to ask you your favourite James Milner moments as well.
Yeah, again, there's lots of ones to pick, but very different ones. But it's hard again to know where to start with him. I think for me, I was having a little think about this before in terms of his stature and kind of the player that he is at the age he is. I think you can't really sum it up better than it looks like he's probably going to go to Brighton when you think of how smart their recruitment is. how good their manager and all of that sort of thing has been for a club like Brighton to be picking him up. I think it says a lot about how people still think of him, the value that he can add. Who knows, maybe it'll be a Liverpool-Brighton Europa League final next season. I mean, you wouldn't put it past them to do something like that, but yeah. No,
don't say that because they're bloody Beatles, because they play like Barcelona every time we play
Brighton.
Brighton.
A penalty, certainly. It's going to be a real loss, I think, for Liverpool with Milner. We've seen him come on and, in the last few games, even just the impact that he's had to be able to close games out. I think, for that kind of experience, I'm pretty sure Jurgen Klopp will keep him around next season. I don't think it's, for any other reason really than he just thinks he can go and play football more regularly elsewhere, and whether that's Brighton or somewhere else. Yeah, he's right, because he is, he's still a very, very good Premier League player.
Favourite moment?
Come back to me. Go to Theo first.
Go on. You've had some time to think about it, so no excuse.
The Bournemouth goal line clearance just before the pandemic.
Wasn't it Burnley?
I thought it was Bournemouth.
Yeah, you might be right.
Because it was just after the Watford 3-0, wasn't it? And you think, is this a Liverpool crumble, or City going to do what they always do? It was a tight game, and then he goes and pulls off this clearance beyond his years. It was superb. But you could choose some of the big goals, the penalties, the celebrations, even the pandemic moments where he's doing sort of countdown for number 10, keeping everyone entertained. He's like just this mean king as well, isn't he? A completely different way to Firmino. But that moment, that clearance, summed it up with James Milner. He's not the most glamorous player, but he never gives up. He always gives his all, and he always delivers. Yeah,
I'll give you one more second to think, Matt, because I'll say mine. I mean, to be fair, I think it's slightly harsh on Milner, because we kind of remember these full-blooded moments, the moment like that. I was going to say rattling Neymar. It kind of like set the tone. It was that. So, I kind of think it set the tone for like Liverpool in Europe that year, being a force again, him leading the way, not allowing a player like that to come to Anfield and totally dominate. But yeah, I mean, maybe that's slightly fair on Milner, because I think we should think of him as a better footballer than perhaps these full-blooded moments, but sort of underlined.
Was that the year he got the record for the assists in the Champions League? Was that the year before? Even then, the fact that he's still got that record says a lot.
Yeah, I think it was that year, wasn't it?
Yeah. Were you going to add anything to that?
I was going to say that, but I seem to remember there was a last-minute penalty against Palace, was it?
Oh, there's a couple.
Point.
Palace
there's more than one. But I think, again, that kind of sums up to have absolute certainty more than any other player. I think that if you could say to me, you need someone to score a penalty for you 100%, who's the closest player that you can get? Probably James Milner would be that one.
Yeah, right. Theo, you mentioned we're going to it's going to get a bit more difficult now. We're going to talk Naby Keita. Where'd you start? Again, more difficult, but he's a player who he will always divide Liverpool fans. I think you could ask 5 different people and they'd give you 5 different answers. But he has played his part in very big moments for Liverpool. He will go away having won every single trophy on offer. How do you sum up your thoughts on Keita?
If he if he'd come and been what we all thought he was going to be without the injuries, consistently done it year after year like a Salah, Liverpool aren't in transition this year. Yeah. He is that star midfielder. They don't need to overhaul everything. That team is built around him. I've said on podcasts before, he could never live up to the hype and the expectation, because we were watching highlight reels from afar for a year. It built him up to this insane level.
It's funny, isn't it? You look back at that deal at the time, Liverpool got a lot of credit for striking it, a clever deal. And in many ways they did. It's hardly fair on Liverpool, but it almost builds them up to fail, didn't it? Because we had a year of going, oh my God.
And then the Gerrard number 8 as well.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, he is a very, very lucky boy that he is coming to this Liverpool side. Yes, he has had so many big moments, but that's because he's been part of a great team that have got him to those big moments. And he's still had injuries. He's been missing big games. Or I think still the most iconic Keita moment I can think of is he scores that worldie against Chelsea. They'd already won the league weeks before by then. It just happens to be the night they left the trophy. But he's very lucky to have been in this era of Liverpool. Because if you put him in any other era in the Premier League, say Houllier signs him in 2002, I think Diouf, Diao, Shearer, and he's a massive big money flop. If Rodgers gets him when they sell Squires and he's along with Markovic, Balotelli and all that mob, he's another big money flop who's let them down. If he's in with, Rafa went to replace Alonso instead of Aquilani, he's let you down. He's another injury-prone player who's not lived up to the hype, spent too much money, hasn't played enough football. But you forgive it because he's contributed these moments now and again for a side that has won every trophy there is to win. that is almost let you forgive those moments. The same as you overlook Thiago missing half a season because he's a quality player. Like, he's been part of something special, and we'll go for those positive moments. But because us journalists, fans, even Klopp himself, have built Keita up to such levels, you can't help but feel there is a little bit of disappointment there to his departure now.
No.
Yeah, exactly that. I think that sums it up really nicely in terms of the expectation was there for a reason. He was clearly a very, very good player, but he's just ultimately never been able to string together a series of performances where he could show that, even when he has played. It's that transformational player. I wonder how much of that is sort of around the way that Liverpool's midfield has been structured. Was it a part of the pitch where you could come in and completely take a hold of it and become a completely different unit as a result, or was it always going to be you bring a Wijnaldum or a Firmino or a Henderson into that midfield and it kind of has to work together as a unit? But yeah, there's no doubt about it. I think he's the one out of the big money signings that hasn't worked. Probably the way you should look at it really is Liverpool have only made one of those mistakes. If you look at any other club, there's several of those examples, whereas Naby Keita is the only one where Liverpool spent that big money and it hasn't quite worked. But we had high hopes, but I think after 5 years we can kind of come to a fair conclusion that it just hasn't worked and it's the right time to move on.
Yeah, I always think that availability is one of a footballer's best attributes, and I think I always look at Keita as one of those players, almost a bit like Harry Kewell, in the sense that every now and again he'll play so well that you imagine what could have been with him. And you look back at 5-0 United, but let's face it,
semi-final last year as well.
I mean, you look back at those types of games, or even 5-0 United, it kind of sums him up. Same with the Atletico Madrid game where he scores this outrageous volley, but then gets subbed off at half time or just before half time. But then the United game gets subbed off, stretched off after a poor challenge, and then really he was fine, wasn't he? Let's face it.
He played the next week.
He played the following week. They kept him back from a game, I think, almost to protect him. But and that was Keita at times. I just think you would have those extremes. I always remember the 4-0 win over West Ham in the first game of the season when he played, and I thought, my God, Liverpool have signed a real star here, and it's such a shame that it didn't work out. But you'll never get that consistency if you keep missing games, and unfortunately for Keita, and I don't know, it's unfair for me to I don't want to make any accusations, but I don't know whether that was a mentality thing or whether he was just really unlucky. But you look at a lot of the injuries, they weren't big ones, they kept him out for short amounts of time, and I'll always remember him missing a pre-season friendly because he sat funny on the plane, and but that kind of like summed him up. And I remember Klopp almost gave a bit of a sarcastic answer about that, saying the seats were comfortable, but obviously not comfortable enough for Naby. And your manager's saying that about you in the first summer you're there. It's a bit of a concern, isn't it? And I always remember Gerrard talking about Sturridge, and sometimes I had to get onto him and say, "Come on, you're fit enough. Play." He would always doubt himself, and in some ways, I don't think you want to blame a player for that, because I think it's quite sad that they maybe aren't sure whether they can get through games, but sometimes I think maybe Keita had a bit of that where it just needed a push to play a bit more.
Well, like I was saying with those earlier eras, and you say with Sturridge there, Liverpool relied on Sturridge for so long because he was the star striker. They've never relied on Naby Keita. It's that availability, the durability. You mentioned Gini Wijnaldum. When Liverpool sign him, you expect him to be 25 million versatile squad player. You never expect him to go and be this ever present who starts every game. You can say the same for Henderson or Milner to an extent. They're not the most glamorous players, but they're just always available. No nonsense, get the job done. If you can start games, if you're available to play, that is the very basic need, and that's what they've been able to do. If Keita's available all the time, he's in that starting midfield ahead of those three because he offers that little bit more, but because he's not, he's injured, they have to turn to the others, and that's when Wijnaldum can step up and score a brace against Barcelona and all these other great moments these three have done. That's the strength in what we're saying for Liverpool next season. You want them to have those plethora of options so we can make those changes, whereas Keita, at the same time, you still want him to be that talisman. It's unfortunate that he seems to be maybe a bit too fragile for the English game, but then he never had these injury problems in Germany as well. There's been a few players when they've come in where they haven't had that pass and it's just not quite clicked for him. At the very least, you say wherever he goes next, get rid of those injuries, go and show what you can do, whether it's back in Germany or go to France, go to Turkey, wherever. He was a talented player. He's got every winner's medal. But he's not going to be one of those players that James Milner, who's playing at one of the top teams in European football well until his late 30s, is he?
Yeah. Okay, and the final exit tomorrow is Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. Probably, the most difficult of these four, I think, to sum up in some ways, Matt. I mean, he obviously had high points. He had low points. He was probably slightly better than he got credit for at times, and also probably, I think, definitely has hung around at Liverpool maybe 2 years longer than perhaps he merited. How will you remember Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain at Liverpool? How will you assess his time?
I think you've got to split it into pre-injury and post-injury. I think that's the easiest way. I think that there's.
But the pre-injury, sorry to interrupt, but that pre-injury is such a small amount of time,
and he started slowly there as well.
Considering that we've just given Keita quite a critical, we had quite a critical discussion around Keita. I think sometimes Oxlade-Chamberlain gets away with that because he had that one little spell before the injury. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely a fair point, and I think the difference between Keita and Oxlade-Chamberlain is for the last 2 seasons, like you say, Oxlade-Chamberlain has been fit but not been selected, whereas Keita is probably the other way around. He probably would have been selected a little bit more, but hasn't necessarily had that. So it's a difficult one. I think Liverpool's midfield would have moved beyond him even had he stayed fit. I don't think he was a perfect fit for that midfield. I also think it's never ever spoken about. I mentioned before about how high a fee they paid for Naby Keita, but they paid £35 million for Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain with a year left on his contract when he wasn't really in a particular position. He wasn't coming in as he's definitely going to be in this Liverpool midfield. He's what we need to move to the next level. It was kind of, he's a bit versatile. He can play on the right. He can play a bit of fullback if you need him to, or wing back. He can play midfield, and that's where he wants. But it did seem to me a bit of a strange one at the time, but you kind of justified it in terms of, maybe this is Liverpool getting to the next level, spending a bit more on a bit more of a squad player. But yeah, obviously homegrown.
Can't help it.
Homegrown.
If it's not Bolton, it's homegrown.
But yeah, no, he's a hard one to assess in terms of split between injuries, split between a kind of probably would have moved beyond him anyway, and he's the one that I will look back over the last couple of years, and we've all said, and it's blatantly obvious that they should have done more with the midfield rather than leaving it to now. I think he's the one that you could have just gone, look, we'll take 10 million for you.
Loan him and get a fee and get
him out. You free up a space in the squad.
So exactly what they did with Adam Lallana as well, isn't it? They had him for 2 years too long. You did great getting to that part of the journey, but then they've outgrown you.
I would argue, just on Oxlade-Chamberlain, I think it was a good signing in the sense that, like with Mount now, I think if you can take advantage of one of your rivals, struggles or whatever it might be, and you can go out and buy the player off them, it's sort of, I've always said this, but you also pats him on the head and says, we're higher in the back of order than you. And you take him and you make him part of your squad. There's nothing wrong. United used to all the time with having good squad players. And that's what I think Oxlade-Chamberlain, when he was fit and at his best, was. He was a good squad player that Liverpool could turn to. He was something a bit different. But yeah, I think 2 years probably too long. I think they probably, if they could have done, and maybe they could have if they would have if they could have, but taking a fee, a loan fee, or get him off the wages and move him on and just get something a bit different. But yeah, like if they sign Mount, I kind of like what they did there.
I think Mount's a higher level.
Oh yeah, no, he is. I accept that.
But then you think how highly rated Oxlade-Chamberlain was when Arsenal got him from Southampton. It was only when the injuries kicked in. He had a few injuries as well that he lost that. Yeah. I think we are a bit more forgiving of him compared to a Keita because it's obvious why it went wrong. He did an ACL injury, the most serious injury a footballer can get. He was never going to be.
And it wasn't just an ACL; it was just like everything else.
Everything just fell apart. So, like Keita, as you say, he's sat funny on the plane. He's kicked the ground and stubbed his toe. He's had these.
They're not all. I don't want that to be characterised. It's not all like that with Keita. There was a bit of bad luck. There were pulls and stuff like that. But I think there were times when you do wonder, and I could be wrong. I want that to be said because I know what people will do, and I don't want my mention. I could be wrong, but there were times where you felt like, could Keita have played a bit through the pain barrier? Whereas Oxlade-Chamberlain, when you get an ACL injury, you don't play through the pain barrier.
It's a bit tough, isn't it? But then, like Matt's pretty much summed it up perfectly, hasn't he? you expected Keita to come in and be that talisman. Oxlade-Chamberlain was only ever a versatile squad player, so your expectations are already so much lower for him. He almost excelled them, even though really we got 4 months of him where he was actually really good.
Yeah.
And Klopp said that in the press conference today, saying, he was irreplaceable. I didn't know what I was going to do because he was so good for those. It is 4 months, isn't it? It's basically the Man City 4-3 in the January to when he did the ACL. It's overlooked a little bit how many goals he scored in the title-winning year. I think there's a video somewhere. It might have been one of the FIFA ratings ones where he goes, "Hey, I was the top scoring midfielder in this squad last season. That's so disrespectful." The rating he got, and you do think he did score a few in that year, like the outside of the foot one against Genk in the Champions League, and he still
away at Bournemouth, didn't he? I think.
Yeah, he scored against Bournemouth. Not when the players were at Cup of Nations or something, and they needed him in the front three. He scored goals.
He scored twice, didn't he? When Salah was away.
Last year,
Brentford and Palace.
And then he scored again when they needed him to against Brentford. Well, didn't help, but against Brentford this season when they were short on options, he was the squad player they needed at the time. He proved himself to be a bit more for that 4-month spell, but then he got injured and they outgrew him and they just couldn't find a place for him. They didn't really need him, but he's homegrown, he ticks the box, he's versatile. But then he's always been that very bottom of the list. Like he is the one you leave out of the squad if everyone's available.
Yeah, true. Okay, moving on then to tomorrow's game. Just a quick note to Aston Villa. Matt, been pretty impressive, haven't they, since Unai Emery came in? I think he was a far better manager than perhaps he got credit for at Arsenal.
I'm sending Steven Gerrard there as well. You thought going on about your mentions, you're 2 foot in the captain now.
No, Unai Emery's done very well. I think, in this little run, this is a far trickier game. I think because it's at home, people are sort of almost looking past it and look at some of the away games are quite difficult. But this is a tough game, isn't it, tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, they've got some really good players, haven't they? Yeah. They've spent a fair bit of money on those players as well. They've got, a decent squad. I think Unai Emery is the perfect manager as well. If they can just squeeze into 7th spot and get into the Conference League, like we were saying with Liverpool being one of the favourites, I think instantly.
And that was an incredible comeback, isn't it, by the way? That is, you think about, they were like in relegation trouble. Sorry, seeing Gerald, but they were, they were struggling, and he is overseeing, remarkable progress.
Yeah, they've got some really good players, and literally he's getting the best out of those players. Felipe Coutinho being an exception to that. He's not managed to do with him, but you think of Ollie Watkins in particular. I think is it Moreno, the left back, looks a really good player that they brought in. They've got some really good players, and if you can add 1 or 2 to that, I don't know how high is the ceiling, how much further can they go than what they have already? But they've been on a great run. I think it will be a tough game.
They'll make life difficult for Liverpool tomorrow. So we'll pick our teams before we go. Theo, there's no real point in getting to the goalkeeper. Although saying that, quick note on goalkeepers. Interesting answer from Klopp today, wasn't it, on Keller in the press conference?
It was. He was very strong. He was shocked, wasn't he, about be asked about Keller might leave. It's like, he's 24. You don't play him. He's only played 3 games, I think. Since
he's spoken openly about it as well, hasn't he?
It's like, surely if Keller asked to go, he will go, because Klopp's always said that if they want to go, we'll let them go. But he said they're taking an extraordinary offer. He's not going anywhere. Maybe comes to thinking you're trying to get Alexis McAllister. Brighton are one of the clubs that could be in for a new goalkeeper. Gets a few million off that price fee. But then he's still Tottenham, might be in the conversation, Brentford. But
if a team like Tottenham are in the conversation, then I understand and 100% agree that Klopp is going to sit there and say, make us a big offer.
Yeah.
Because goalkeepers don't go cheap now. And he is, he's 24, great young player, isn't he?
He's played, over 100 games for Liverpool if they don't have the best goalkeeper in the world. Yeah. You're not even having this conversation if they don't have Addison. Think of all the times where, was it Dudek in goal, Westerveld in goal, Mignolet in goal. You're just waiting for a youngster to come on and take the place. There wasn't anyone there. Keller was keeping him, and they just so happened to have him when they've got the best keeper around. So it's one to watch. It's an interesting one. Klopp does lie. Managers are all going to lie when they're asked that question because they want a few more million. And I think there will probably be a conversation right now. If Keller is getting itchy feet, you'd imagine he will go, come on, at least let me go out on loan here. But
I've always thought a sell with a buyback would be a great solution to that.
Because on paper, they did it with Jordan Ivan. While he didn't work out for him at Bournemouth, there was still sense in that. But if Keller's happy to sit on the bench, play the domestic cup games, maybe throwing it back into Europa League comes into it. Addison plays every Champions League.
It's going on to Dublin. There you go. There's the story.
Keller,
it's all coming together.
Every Europa League game, isn't he? Yeah. So maybe they get another season out of him there. Add a few million after a year. It's penalty heroics in a Europa League final against Brighton at Dublin. But we'll see.
Yeah. So on the bench tomorrow.
Yeah.
Too right. Okay, you're back 4.
It's the same, isn't it? There's no reason to change it. Trent, Canate, and Robertson.
Absolutely. Strongest you wouldn't change it.
Yeah, I've got a feeling it's going to be quite boring team selection because Theo, is your midfield the same?
Yeah, part of me wants to be a bit sentimental and give James Milner a start, but there is actually still something to play for Liverpool. It's not mathematically impossible for that Champions League place yet. If it was, I'd be going to start Milner, start Firmino. Hell, Keita can walk, Oxlade-Chamberlain can walk, start them as well.
Yeah.
But there's something to play for. They'll have to make do for substitutes at best. So it'll be Jones, Henderson, Fabinho.
Would you disagree with that?
No, it's got to be the same. For Curtis Jones, it's another match that you just hope he can keep that rhythm going. I think for someone like Jordan Henderson, there's a long enough gap now for him, and Fabinho's been excellent the last few weeks and has sort of solved a bit of a question mark I had in my head going into the summer. I think I'd be way more confident now. If I'd be surprised if Fabinho didn't start the first game of next season, whereas a month ago it probably would have been the other way around.
Yeah, and that is, a lot have been said about Curtis Jones, rightly so. Really pleased for him. Always liked him, and I think it's great to see him playing well. Henderson we sort of know, but it's having Fabinho is so big, isn't it? And back in form and looking confident.
I wonder if that's one where the formation changes really helped him as well, because when he came from Monaco, Klopp was saying, he's not used to playing as this lone number 6. He needs a player alongside him. So for 4-2-3-1, he would play him, but he took a while to get used to 4-3-3. I think maybe the legs have gone a little bit. He can't cover the ground all on his own, especially if you've got your full-backs marauding forwards, your forwards not coming back, the midfield's not there. But you put someone in the centre alongside him, and suddenly he looks a lot more confident. He was pressing so high against Leicester, wasn't he? Winning balls back. He looked a little bit more like his old self. Be interesting to see what combination of midfielders they bring in, to see how it complements him. But he's still, for now, isn't he, that first choice, number 6, knowing he's still younger than some of the ones they're getting rid of and not injury prone compared to some of them. We've got a very good player in Stefan Bajcetic who's just waiting in the rings to eventually inherit that place. Maybe Tyler Morton, if he comes back.
Sounds
like it, doesn't it? I know he's had his season ended by injury, but he's another one you look at in pre-season. I know that'll probably
homegrown.
That'll get the mentions going on what you say.
Yeah,
don't want to sign Jude Bellingham because you've got Tyler Morton. But like we see with Curtis Jones now, if you've got the players there and they are talented, it's a feel-good factor because, we don't need to go and spend 60 million on a midfielder because we had a very good player already here.
And also, no one's sitting there saying Tyler Morton should be playing it for every week, but, if you have him as an option to rotate, that's fine.
He's starting the League Cup games, Europa
League games, only in the end part of the competition.
Yeah, group stages.
Don't ruin my Dublin trip. And then forward line again. Are we going to say the same?
One change for me. I'm putting Jota in.
Jota.
I think the only reason
Diaz.
I think the only reason he didn't start the last couple, wasn't it? Is because he was getting a few knocks here and there. Yeah. I think he got through Leicester unscathed. He's had another week on the training field. He's a bit fitter in terms of he hasn't had as recently has come back from that long-term injury, and he's still got to manage Diaz carefully.
Yeah.
So Jota.
What about you, Matt?
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough one to pick between those two. I think definitely it'll be Cody Gakpo again, the one that's really impressed me. And obviously it'll be Salah who's there as well, but it's then just that left side, isn't it? And I'm not too fussed either way, to be honest. I'd go just about go Diogo Jota, but either way.
I think I'm going to go Diaz. I like the way they complement each other. Those three. Nunez isn't available.
Firmino wasn't just coming back from injury. We'd all be saying, just put Gakpo on. 90 minutes. Have to do for 20 minutes off the bench or something, wouldn't he?
Finish off with a prediction, Theo.
2-0.
2-0. Yeah, Matt.
2-1. I think it'll be very tight. I think they might score.
To be fair, Watkins does like a goal at Liverpool.
Yeah, I think they're quite good at getting in behind with the high line, aren't they? Which we don't need to go over the debates around that sort of stuff again. But I think they'll get a couple of chances. I fancy them to score Liverpool to win. Yeah,
go along with what you're saying there. I think it will be a bit of a slog at times tomorrow. I think Villa will make it that way, but I just fancy Liverpool to carry on this momentum and push towards that Dublin dream. So we'll leave it there. Thanks for listening. We'll be back on Monday to talk the fallout of that game, to see if there'll be any slip-ups in the race to the top 4 and to look ahead to the final game of the season. See you then. Ta-ra.